Good afternoon, everybody, and welcome to our qualitative webinar series hosted by the DSI-NRF Center of Excellence in Human Development, which is based at Wits University. My name is Lucanyo Nyati, and I'm going to be hosting you for this series of webinars, which is focusing on longitudinal data. And we're really going to be looking at the management, the cleaning and analysis of longitudinal data. And we're going to be drawing lessons from some of the cohort studies that we have worked on here in South Africa. So welcome and thank you for joining. We hope that you are going to benefit from the insights that we're going to share during our webinar series, and hopefully you will gain skills that you may apply in your own studies. So just to alert you that these webinars are recorded, and obviously they will be stored. The aim is to store them as a learning resource for the COE, and you will have an opportunity to ask questions at the end of the presentation, and there is a Q&A section where you are able to post your questions, and preferably where possible, as much as possible, do not use the chat, but use the Q&A section. But if you struggle to find the Q&A section in the presentation, you can use the chat. All right, just a brief overview of these webinars. The first one, which is today, is basically going to be an introduction to the planning of longitudinal studies and data management. So we're going to look basically at considerations for planning of longitudinal studies, which we believe is a very important element of these types of studies. And in the second webinar, which is happening tomorrow on Thursday, the 16th of October, we're going to look at tools for exploring and cleaning of longitudinal data. And in 2 weeks' time, which is on Wednesday, the 29th of October, we're going to, on 30th and Thursday, the 30th of October, we're going to focus on the analysis, the actual analysis of longitudinal data, which is the modeling. And generally, these webinars are going to take quite a practical approach, and we're going to introduce the concepts, but we also want to explain or demonstrate practically how some of these steps can be undertaken when you are analyzing longitudinal data. And part of what you will receive as participants in our webinars is a toolkit, which includes analysis, a statistical analysis plan, a format of a visit map, which is an important component of a longitudinal study, as well as scripts that you can use in the R statistical statistical software that will allow you to manipulate, to visualize, as well as to model longitudinal data. And there will be also another document that helps you or guides you in terms of how to download R onto your computer. R is a open source software, and it's quite versatile and comes with a number of packages which are very useful for all statistical analysis, but we found it very useful for analysis of longitudinal data. Now, right up front, I just want to acknowledge some of the colleagues who have contributed some insights to today's webinar. And this includes colleagues that I've worked with at the Developmental Pathways for Health Research Unit, where we worked on some of the longitudinal studies that, where we learned some of the insights that we are sharing here today. We have Karabo Morane, Vihan Talyad, Nomsa Twala, and this team, combined has a combined experience of 35 years. And, and I think it's very important that we document some of the key learnings that we have learned from the experiences and the lessons that we learned in trying to fine-tune the processes that we applied in the study. And it's not something that happened overnight. It took quite a while for us to get to a stage where we're comfortable in terms of the running and the flow, the project flow process. And I think it's very important that those lessons are documented. But also, I just want to pay tribute to another colleague who was part of this team. We were a team of about 7 individuals, including Jackson, who has since who passed away earlier this year. And we just want to pay. And Jackson played a huge role in the recruitment of participants, as well as the engagements with communities. And there are other colleagues as well who are no longer part of the unit and at VERS who contributed to the lessons that we are going to be drawing from today, including Zintle Daraza, as well as Muleboheng Mutlatledi. So these are some of the colleagues that I thought I should acknowledge, and there are many other individuals who contributed to what we know. So for today's webinar, I'm hoping that we will be able to gain insights into the planning of longitudinal studies, as well as into tools to manage the study, to manage data, as well as study workflows, and also the types of variables in longitudinal study, and to gain practical insights into preparing data for analysis. And this is really these are really the first steps that we undertake in the process of analysis. And as stated in this quotation here, which I also want to foreground, I want to foreground the importance of the collection. When we're looking at the definition of statistics, it's defined as the mathematics of collection, organization, and interpretation of numerical data, especially the analysis of population characteristics by inference from sampling. So right up front, I want to foreground the importance of the planning, because the operational aspects of data management, which is the collection and the organization of data, because without a proper implementation of the processes for data collection and the organization of data, it makes it difficult for us to interpret the data or the findings that we find from the studies that we are implementing. So today's webinar and today's and tomorrow's webinars will focus on the elements of the collection and the organization. In particular, today and tomorrow, we're going to focus on how we can prepare data and or clean data in preparation for analysis. Now, data management is very important, and building data management systems is extremely important particularly for large studies. And we've worked on both small and large studies, and these management systems improve data security. They improve the validity of the data and the findings that we generate from the studies, and they also improve the transparency of our research and the reproducibility of our results. I'm going to contextualize this presentation, or the presentation and the application of longitudinal data analysis in this area of human development, being the center of excellence in human development. This is a core focus of our mandate, and therefore the studies that we've operated, that we've applied these tools in, largely have to do with studies of human development. And so, as a start, we want to emphasize the importance of investing in human development as a crucial element of economic development. One of my favorite quotations, which is found in the report, the UNICEF report called The Progress of Nation from 2002 or 2012. This quotation comes from there. It says, the success the world has in protecting children's rights and realizing human potential is captured far more eloquently in flesh and bone than in concrete or steel, far more tellingly in the height of children than in that of skyscrapers. And this quotation really reinforces the importance of focusing and investing in human development for the success of nations. And one of the tools that gives us insights into human development are longitudinal studies. And this quotation from this paper by Himes in 2006 highlights the importance of longitudinal studies in helping us to understand the trends in development and the factors that influence child well-being. And it goes longitudinal studies on child growth and development, along with the conditions shaping these processes, provide valuable insights into factors influencing child well-being. So if we want to understand what are the drivers of child well-being in whatever context that we're interested in, longitudinal studies are an important tool. And ultimately, that gives us insight into population health as well as human capital. However, longitudinal studies are complex. And because they are complex, they require careful consideration and planning. Now, in our planning of longitudinal studies, we must consider how we can reduce attrition, missingness, outliers, and improve harmonizations, which are common problems in these types of studies. And really, the point that we want to emphasize is that, in terms of managing data of these studies, especially the large longitudinal studies, it is about managing the process and ensuring that we have developed systems and created workflows that align, or rather align our data collection processes to systems and to a workflow that allows for efficient data collection. And the question that we must ask ourselves is, how do we develop systems, including data management systems, to support the process? And how do you align our data management to the processes of data collection? And it is important for us to think about the problems that we are likely to encounter during data collection. And sometimes I know it is very difficult to do that, but hence studies, the lessons such as the ones that we are drawing today are very important, because our experiences from managing these studies can help us to preempt some of the problems that we may identify, or that we may experience rather, in longitudinal studies. And so for people who will implement longitudinal studies in the future, they can draw on these lessons and put these systems in place to ensure that they do not experience some of the challenges that we experienced, or to preempt some of these challenges. And we're going to draw lessons from these studies, as I mentioned. And some of these studies include the Birth to 40 research program, which had a sample of about 3,272 participants at the beginning, which began in 1990, the Soweto First 1,000 Days, the IAEA Multicenter Infant Body Composition Reference Study, which had a sample of about over 700, and this was a global study recruiting children from 6 countries, including South Africa, Brazil, Pakistan, Sri Lanka, Australia, and Pakistan. The Healthy Life Trajectories Initiative, or HEALThy, which has collected data or recruited over 6,000 women into this behavioral trial based in Soweto, as well as another study that I've worked on, that I continue to collaborate on at the University of Johannesburg, the COP study, which is focusing on child well-being with a much smaller sample of 162, and is also a longitudinal study with 3 waves. We started in 2020. Now, obviously, the choice to apply or to use a longitudinal design is informed by the research question, and every other aspect of the data collection process or the research process is informed by that research question. So, and this really highlights the importance of a research question in driving design, in driving the data collection processes, as well as the analysis of the data. Now, just a brief overview before we start in terms of the different designs, especially when we're looking at the element of time. Basically there are the different types of designs that we have are a cross-sectional design where we collect data at one single time point. We also have a case control study, which is a retrospective type of study, and where you already have outcomes and you're looking back to see what were the factors that may have contributed to that particular outcome. And we also have cohort studies, which have got a longitudinal nature and are prospective, and you follow up individuals with some without considering N exposure, and generally you are considering without considering rather the outcome, and generally you may be considering the exposure, and you follow up those individuals and you see which individuals may develop an outcome and which individuals will not develop an outcome. And in this type of study, you are able to work out incidence, you're able to work out risk as a result of exposure to certain conditions. And longitudinal studies or cohort designs are suitable for both observational and intervention studies. Now, one of the important considerations when designing longitudinal studies is the balance between sample size, frequency of measurements, and the duration of collection. And these are very important because the efficiency or the efficiency in terms of the output, or the efficiency in terms of the results that you obtain from these types of studies depends on finding a good balance between these 3 factors: the sample size and the frequency of the measurements and data collection. And there are statistical tools that we can use to simulate or optimize some criteria that give us insight into this kind of balance. All right, and also there are documents that we can use, such as the statistical analysis plan, that can help us to think ahead about what we're going to be analyzing. And generally, so when we're planning longitudinal studies, or in fact, not just longitudinal studies, but generally large studies, we have both scientific and operational considerations. And the scientific considerations are the actual research question that we're trying to answer, as well, and also the statistical analysis plan that we want to implement. And these are things that we need to think about right at the beginning. This is not something that we think about as we're going through with the study, but right at the beginning, we think about the statistical analysis plan. One of the studies, for example, the IAA multi-center infant body composition reference study, we had a team coming from the different countries where we collected the data, and we discussed the variables that needed to be collected in the study, and that was obviously influenced by the research question that we're trying to answer. And based on that research question, we had to define the objectives And based on those objectives, we then identified the variables that we needed to collect. And this is very important because sometimes in these types of studies, I have seen situations where we collect a number of variables, some of which we will not use in our analysis. But because we feel that we are collecting, we have got this opportunity to follow up this sample for a period, we feel that we must collect as much as possible. And this contributes to fatigue. And this is part of the things that contribute to attrition, for example, or participants falling out of studies or withdrawing from studies because they spend there's this concept of participant fatigue, where if you're collecting too much data on participants and they spend so much time at our research settings or wherever we're collecting data, that may contribute to the fatigue. And so if we plan ahead and define the variables that we're going to be collecting in this statistical analysis plan, that helps to reduce the amount of variables that we're going to be collecting on the participants. And also on the other side, we need to think about the operations. How do we create an efficient process of data collection? And that is not something that comes about easily. Sometimes you need to pilot the process so that you understand how the project workflow is going to work, and that is going to inform how you set up your data management systems. Because right now, as you will see in later slides, we are using real-time data management and data capturing systems and no longer using paper to collect our data. And that is beneficial in many ways, but also it has disadvantages in the sense that once you collect the data on an individual, it is difficult to correct because you have collected it in real time and there is no paper record that you can go back on. So if you are able to streamline your data management processes, it reduces this need to go back, or it reduces the errors that may exist in the data capturing that will then require if there's possibility, one to go back and make corrections, which is very difficult, as I said, in the current situations. So, over time, sorry, over time, so we've applied different tools to manage our data, as well as to in terms of data analysis, as you will see later on. Now, in terms of the different elements of planning, the main scientific objective of the study, obviously, is to estimate the regression parameters as precisely as possible within budget. And how do you do that? You do that by putting in place a statistical analysis plan to define the variables, statistical tools to estimate the adequate sample size for in order to answer that research question, as well as statistical tools to optimize frequency of measurements. And so all of these exist, and these are important elements that are utilized during the planning stages of a study. An optimal cohort design is one among all possible cohort designs for which an objective function of the variances and covariances of parameters estimators is minimized. So we need to find an optimal balance between sample size and measurement frequencies that gives the most precise estimates. And there are statistical tools which can be used to estimate this. We will not go through this as part of this webinar, but I'm just making you aware that there are tools that are available to do that. And this is part of the planning process. Now, in terms of the operational side of planning, the key objective is to align the data management to project workflow. And the important question, as I said earlier, is that how do we align the data management with the operational process to reduce these challenges that we experience in longitudinal data studies, in longitudinal studies, such as attrition, missingness, outliers, as well as poor harmonization of data. And these are the common challenges, as I said earlier: attrition, missing data, and poor lack of harmonization. And so if we build agile data management systems, it can help us to address some of these challenges. And we can use these data management tools to manage workflow for recruitment, to retain participants, and also to track participants. And so one of the considerations that we had to make, one of the challenges that we had to look at when we're looking at these studies was, how do we improve our systems for better recruitment, for better retention, and to track participants where they are in the process, so that we're at every stage we know where a participant is, and whether they are lost to follow up or they're still part of the study. And there are certain tools that we developed, and in order to do that, and I'll give insights into some of them. All right, and some of the systems that we had to put in place, obviously, are basic, logical systems, such as obviously training of staff, and in order for staff to know how to frame the messaging of the study, but also importantly, how to engage the communities that where we're going to be recruiting our staff members, our participants, so that process of continuous community engagement is extremely important. And one of the things that we had to develop in our studies is these tracking tools, where we are able to generate alerts to project coordinators, for example, in terms of the different stages where participants are. So, as an example, one of the studies, which is a preconception study, and that is the healthy study, the Healthy Life Trajectories initiative. That study recruited young women from the ages of 18 to 29 before they fall pregnant. And the aim is to ensure, from a data collection process, is to ensure that when a woman falls pregnant, they then get channeled into a pregnancy tracking phase, as opposed to a preconception phase. So those who do not fall pregnant will be tracked for 18 months until they exit out of the study. But those who fall pregnant, whenever they fall pregnant during the 18 months, they will then be followed up for the duration of the pregnancy. And if they stay with the study, the infant will be followed up to the age of 5 years. Now, we needed systems to alert us when a woman falls pregnant, for example, because it is very easy for these participants to fall through the cracks, and we recognize later, way later, that a woman fell pregnant. So, and we had to recruit them into the pregnancy phase at a very early stage of pregnancy. So if we do not have systems to alert us about a particular pregnancy, then that woman can easily fall through the cracks and will miss that particular pregnancy. And this happened quite a number of times until we recognize the problem and we develop the systems to generate these alerts. And we used all our systems, and this is a point that I didn't make earlier, all the systems were built in REDCap. And so, and I'm going to, give just a brief introduction to REDCap later on, a verbal introduction. And so tracking is one of the tools, or one of the systems that we put in place, and it also assists. Having these tracking systems also assist with accurate and giving an accurate account of the numbers. So when we are writing publications, for example, for these types of studies, we need to generate a flow chart that demonstrates the recruitment process, the number of people that were recruited, the number of people that were finally included in the well, the number of people that were screened, the number of people that were included in the study, number of people who were lost to follow up, and and that will then should add up to the number of people that are included in the final analysis. So having these tracking tools help us with that accounting, or that accountability. One of the challenges was retention, and there are many challenge, and that can be attributed to many challenges, such as relocation, which is beyond the control of the study, but also participant changing contact numbers, and also participant fatigue, which I alluded to earlier, as well as customer satisfaction or participant satisfaction. And this is linked to participant fatigue. So if you can manage your processes and streamline your processes using these data tools to try and manage it, it helps with improving retention. And one of the elements that we thought was very important is obviously providing feedback to participants. And this happens in one of in the health study, where there is, when participants are randomized into either, so as I mentioned earlier, it is a randomized control trial. So when participants are randomized into either the control arm or into the intervention arm, they do get real-time feedback of their health status. And this is something that is beneficial to participants, because it's not only about what we get out of these studies in terms of the information that we receive from participants and we publish, but participants also want to know what their health status is. And so these kinds of feedback, but also if it can be done consistently, and with these systems, we're able to provide that kind of information. Now, this slide here just demonstrates the evolution of the data management systems and tools that we have used over time. Now, some of these studies started before my time. I wasn't there in 1990 when I started, but I did join in the period very soon. I think it was around the year 2000, before we transitioned into different data management systems. And when I started off, we were working, I mean, I wasn't doing data collection, but I started off in the data archive room of the study. I think it must have been around the year 2000. And all the data were in paper format, and the data were being captured into Excel, for obviously for electronic having the data electronically, so that the data can be analyzed. And this represents an early phase in terms of our data management systems. Obviously, there was an accurate filing system, which ensured that the hard copy files of every participant were stored securely, and the data of every participant was stored securely. And then we moved on to other tools, such as Microsoft access. Now, in terms of data, in terms of databases, you want to your database must, one of the abilities that it must have is that you must be able to run queries. Now, with a flat database, if I may call it that, like such as Excel or data storage platforms such as Excel, you are unable to generate queries. And we then moved on to a platform such as Microsoft Access, which assisted us to generate these queries and to generate reports. So this was really the beginning of um, sort of I wouldn't say sophisticated, but good data management good data management tools. But the challenge with this is that these were still file-based, and which had a huge implications for security, because files can be lost. So even if it's electronic files, those files can be lost. And we did experience this when we're trying to migrate data for the best of 20 study from these files into a cloud platform, which is RedCap. Now, RedCap is we've been using RedCap since the studies such as the S1000, the Soweto First 1,000 Days study. And RedCap, the advantages of RedCap is that it is cloud-based and has got strong security features in terms of, for example, managing access into a particular project, as well as being supported by the institution. So in every institution, in most academic institutions here in South Africa, RedCap is available, and it is supported by the institutional ICT systems. And there's both RedCap systems or security updates, as well as university or institutional security updates. And now this made improved our data management systems, because first of all, we're able to move to real-time data capturing, and it was paperless. So we reduced our reliability on paper. But this is where, as I said earlier, we experienced other problems, such as the inability to go back to correct data when we pick up mistakes during data collection. So, but with time, we're able to build systems, or to build measures within RedCap itself that help us to manage the process, but also help us to reduce data missingness, as well as to reduce data capturing errors. And in terms of data analysis tools, as you can see here, we moved from SPSS, which is more or less a click and drop data analysis tool, where you've got different tabs in a menu, and you can point on the tab, and you can then select the model or the analytical method that you want to apply, and you analyze the data. The challenge with that is that, is how do you keep track of the analysis that you have done for reproducibility? I know that SPSS does have a syntax page, which is quite difficult, but moving from SPSS to formats such as data and R helped us to improve that reproducibility, because we're able to use stata do files as well as R scripts to keep a clear record of the different steps that we undertook in managing the data, in manipulating the data, as well as in analyzing the data. So these are tools that are available to researchers to apply. As I said, if you are at any at academic institution, these are freely available. RedCap is freely available, and R is freely available, whereas data is a proprietary software and may not be available to everyone in a particular institution. For the COP study, they developed their own database, but working with the data, I've been using R to manage the data, and you will see later on some of the how I've used that platform to prepare the data for analysis. And this moves, this evolution was positive in many ways. For example, the evolution from paper to electronic data capturing improved the efficiency of data collection, and the move from flat to relational databases allowed us the ability to create queries and to generate reports. The move from file-based to cloud-based systems improved data security because we're no longer worried about data files being corrupted. Obviously, there are other security risks such as hacking, but like I said earlier, institutions have got strong security systems to protect the data. Even RedCap itself is constantly being updated to ensure that the data are protected. And the move from the drop and click statistical software to code-based improved automation of functions, but also importantly, this question of reproducibility. And more journals are requiring researchers to submit a document that demonstrates the steps that they took to achieve or to obtain the results that they are presenting in their manuscripts. So these tools are extremely important for improving our scientific output. Some of the tools that you can apply in RedCap include tools like piping, the calendar function, and you're able to generate alerts, data quality rules, data validations, checklists for data completeness, and the tracking tool to track where participants are. As I said, you are able to track contacts to keep track of participant status. As I mentioned earlier, if a participant falls pregnant, it is important that we pick that up very early. And also, if a participant is lost to follow up, it is important that we are able to pick that up early. So so part of what we're doing with lost to follow up participants is that when we are able to generate or able to get staff members to go out into field to try and trace those participants. So we're able to put into place tracing mechanisms for those participants to see what were the challenges, what were the reasons why they lost interest, or and sometimes it was not because they lost interest, it was because it was difficult to get hold of them. And one of our colleagues, who's the manager of the COE, wrote a paper about the changing contact details or contact numbers that made it difficult to reach out to participants. And there were many different reasons why would not be able to get hold of participants, including network issues, and also for example, at the time of load shedding, participants not being able to charge their cell phones. And so having these systems that are able to identify or to flag participants that are at risk of being lost to follow up, we were able to trace those participants and to re-recruit them into the study. It's important to generate monitoring dashboards to see which participants are due for specific visits. And also our data capturing should mimic, so sometimes we get data from the Road to Health card. And so it's important to set up systems. When we're setting up our systems, it's important to mimic how the data are captured in those documents, because you don't want researchers or research assistants or field workers to be doing conversions, because that can lead to data error. So it's important to understand what tools or where you're going to be drawing your data from, and that you align your data collection tools to those systems. And as much as possible, one of the lessons that we learned is that it is important not to capture IDs, but to generate automatic IDs. And because what happens is that capturing errors happen, and the result of capturing errors is that you have difficulty in merging data of the same participant, um, because there's a mismatch in the unique ID. So as you are aware, we assign unique IDs to every participant. We don't use their identifiable characteristics such as their name and so on. That is unethical. So we're ethically required to assign unique IDs to every participant. So if you capture an ID manually in different platforms, where that is required, that creates a problem, because, as I said earlier, that may result in the inability to merge different data. It's important to create proper checkout forms, to create proper branching logic, and also, where possible, to pipe data through rather than recapturing, and also to use validations appropriately to minimize data capturing. Now, for the last few minutes, I want to go into some of the, consideration to some of the tools that we can use for preparing data for analysis. I want to demonstrate some of those tools, and most of this preparation is done in the R statistical platform, which, as I said earlier, is a free software for statistical analysis, and it is code-based. So for some, sometimes when you use R for the first time, it can be intimidating, but with time, I found that it is a very useful tool. So I'm going to go now into some of the examples, because of time. I can see our time now is going for 3 o'clock. So I want to demonstrate quickly some of the functions that we can use in R, and this will be available to you actually as part of the analytical toolkit that is provided to you for this webinar. So what should be harmonized? You need to harmonize the names, the variable names. You need to harmonize the formats of the variables and the variable types. For example, one of the challenges that I experienced is different formats of date. So in North America, they capture date with starting with the month, followed by the day, and followed by the year. Whereas here we generally use the year followed by the month, followed by the day, or the day followed by the month, followed by the year. So there are different formats of capturing date on on all platforms, including Excel or Access or even RedCap. So it's important right up front, that the harmonization process specifies the formats in which those data, such as the date rather, will be captured, because it creates problems in the end when one is preparing data for analysis. All right. And you also sometimes need to deal with multiple spreadsheets. And if you've got names which are not harmonized, it will be difficult to merge those spreadsheets, whether you're doing a vertical merge, which will create a long database, a longitudinal database, or you are doing a horizontal merge, which will create a wide database. If there are challenges, for example, with the IDs, it will create problems with a horizontal merge. Whereas if there are challenges with harmonization of variable names, it will create problems with the vertical merge. And I'm going to demonstrate some of this to you at this moment. So you will receive a document that shows that provides you with the steps to download R and also to download RStudio. RStudio is an interface, it's a user-friendly interface that we use to analyze data in R or to manipulate data in R. It has basically 4 windows. This is just a quick orientation of RStudio. It has 4 windows, and the first window that you see here is a script. All right, so I've got different scripts here that are currently open. These different tabs will tell you the different scripts that are currently open. All right, so this is a script that you will receive. It's a prepared script that shows the different functions that are suitable for performing some of these functions that you need to perform. And this one here, this is where I've populated it with data. Obviously, these are not data that I can share, but I will share with you practice data set, a practice data set that you can use to apply these tools. All right. So as I was saying earlier, so there's 4 windows. The first window is the script. So this is where you write your code. And this is the document that you can share with either the publishers if you're publishing a manuscript, so that it is, or you can store it in a database where it can be accessed by other researchers who want to validate your findings. The next window below that on the left is the console. This is where all the results of the manipulations that we run will appear. All right, so all the results will appear in the console here. The environment will provide a list of all the objects that are created in R. R is an object based software, in that everything that you're creating should be assigned to an object. For example, if you're importing data, you must give it a name, as I show here, demonstrate here. So when I'm importing this data, I must give it a name, and that name is going to appear in this environment. This is the object. When I'm talking about objects, I'm talking about this is what I'm talking about. All right. So the environment will provide a list of all the objects that have been created in your session, in your R session. And here in this window here, the last window has got different tabs. You can see if you generate plots, you can see the plots here. You can see the packages that are available in your R software. And there's also the help function, which is very useful if you want to ask help about the different functionalities. Now, for the next 10 minutes before I stop and hand over for questions, I just want to demonstrate how it works. I'm not going to read everything that is here. This script has been prepared for you, so you will have access to the notes that I've created here. Except to say that, I just want to emphasize the point of writing notes in your script, because it is very important for people who read your script to understand the steps that you've taken. So in terms of best practice, one of the things that I do is, for example, to create subsections in my script. And for example, here, I have written the subheading for this section here is selecting selecting a working directory. A working directory is a folder where you are going to be drawing or importing data from, and where you're going to be exporting your results to. All right. And it's important to select or to specify a working directory. All right. So that's the first thing that you do when you are running, when you're working with this platform. Even with Stata, if using a Stata do file, it is important to set a working directory, because if you're going to be importing and exporting anything from Stata, as you will see later on, for example, in Stata, we're able to export regression results. If you do not set a working directory, it will export them into a default working directory, which may be your documents, for example, my documents. So, and you may find it difficult to find those files. All right. So there are different formats of setting up a working directory, and this function here, set working directory, is the basic function in R, but the format, all right, of the path of your directory will depend on where you're going to store your data, or where you're going to draw your data from. For me, for this particular exercise, the path for the folder that I'm going to be using is in my iCloud. And in my iCloud, I've got a folder called research training and a subfolder called longitudinal data training. So this is the folder that I'm going to be using for this particular training. So the point that I was making earlier is how I organize my script. I've created a subheading, and if you want your subheadings, so scripts can be crowded, and one of the strategies that you can use to try to help navigate through your script quite easily is adding these dash lines, 4 dash lines at the end. What that allows you to do is that it allows you to minimize um, the information that is below that subheading. So I see I did not add the lines next to this subheading. So it was added under the first subheading. So if I do that again, you will see that the next subheading is installing packages. And then the next subheading is calling all relevant libraries. All right. So R has got both base functions as well as user developed functions. Some of the functions that you need, for example, if you want to import data, Excel data in Excel, you must use a user developed package, which is called Read Excel. So you must install that package first in your R software before you can use it. So simply, if I wanted to install this package, I would use this function here, install the packages, Read Excel in quotation marks, and it will then allow me to install that package in my R package or in my R software. All right. Now to use that, I call it by calling all the packages that are in my library. And so I just use this function library, and it calls this specific function. All right. And this helps me to import Excel data. And if I want to import SPSS or Stata data, I can use this function Haven. All right. You will learn about the other libraries as we go through. So again, the point that I was making, to finish off the point that I was making, my script is organized in sections, and each section has got a subheading. And I can also add notes using the hash button. I can add notes. Everything that follows a hash is not recognized as a code, and it is recognized as a note. So even if I can add a hash here, rather. R is not going to recognize this here as part of this code, all right? It recognizes that this code ends here. All right, so I'm going to demonstrate quickly how to perform these functions here in R in the next 5 minutes. Now, to run any function in R, you use this button. You click on this button, run here, and your cursor must be next to the line that you want to run. So, for example, now I want to install all of these packages so that I can use them in my R session. So I can either click run and install it, and install each package at a time, or I can highlight all of them. As you can see here, it tells me that this package has been called into R, or I can highlight all of them and I can click run, and it's going to call all of these packages. All right. Now, as I said earlier, you can import data in different formats in R for rather. You can import a CSV format. You can import in Excel. You can import in Stata format. You can import in SPSS format. So depending on the format in which your data is stored, you can import that data. Now, this is a base function in R, and so you don't need to import any. The base functions are already imported in the R base package. So when you download R, it comes with the base package. But these ones, as I said earlier, they need to be installed. So if you want to be able to manipulate Excel data, Stata data, or SPS data in R, I need to install these packages. All right. Now I've already called this. This package is already installed in my R, and I've already called it into my session. All right. Now I'm going to import rather this data, and I'm going to demonstrate. So I'm doing this practically to demonstrate to you, part of these challenges, for example, with harmonization of variables and how we can, and some of the functions that you can use to clean or to manipulate the data if this is a case that you encounter. So I'm going to call, okay, so one thing that I did not do, one thing that I did not do was to set the working directory, as I said earlier. So I need to set the working directory, which is here. All right. I almost didn't find it. Okay. So the working directory has been set. Now I know that one of the useful things about R is that I can set the working directory as the main folder. So the main folder here for this longitudinal data training is called longitudinal data. But within that, I've created subfolders. For example, the data are stored in the subfolder called data. Now, I'm able to navigate to that subfolder by specifying here that, I've already specified the working directory, but within that working directory, I want to go into a subfolder called data. So I'm going to run that, and as you can see, I mentioned earlier that in the global environment, you will see all the objects that currently exist in your R session. All right. So this is a data set. And if I open it, this is a real data set for one of the studies that I worked on. And as you can see here, there's a unique respondent ID, the weight for age, z-scores, height for age, z-scores, BMI for age, z-scores, child date of birth, caregiver date of birth, and also different variables. Now, I want to demonstrate to you one of the challenges that I had, for example, with these variables. And I'm going to demonstrate shortly. So let me just before I do that, I want to import all the different waves of that data. All right. So I've imported the first wave, and I'm going to show you. So I also, to show the variable names, I created another object, which is a data frame, to store the variable name so that I can view them in a, I can clearly see what variables exist in my data set. Now you can see very clearly that this is not a nice way of naming variables. In fact, these variables they have been cut short because they are long questions. Now, one of the challenges that I experienced in dealing with this data was the fact that, at the different waves, the same question can be cut at different stages of the or different places rather. So, for example, in wave one, it is cut at does your child attend school? Whereas in wave two, it may be does your child attend? Just as an example. So if you are trying to merge these two files, these will not match because they are not harmonized. So this is what I'm talking basically. This is what I mean when I talk about harmonization of variables, in the sense that the variables at the different waves or different time points of your study must be harmonized. So and tools like RedCap assist with doing that. But if you experience a challenge like that, as such as as this real challenge, then there are ways, there are tools that you can use that to try and automate this cleaning. So rather than going through every single variable name and changing it, there are codes that we can apply to do that. So I'm going to import all of these data sets. I'm not going to view all of them. All right. Another way of viewing the variable names of a data set is using this function here called names. All right. And if I click names for this first data set here, all right, you can see the variable names. It shows me all the variables. What I did earlier was that I assigned them into I stored them into an object, which was called wave one old names. Now, for this particular study, and we did an exercise, and this exercise was after the data was collected. And this is what I mean again. I like examples because examples are able to emphasize the point that may not be clear. So we did this process after the data were collected, and the harmonization process after the data were collected. But the point that I was making is that this is something that should be done at the beginning of the study. So the harmonization should happen. So, but anyway, we did the exercise of harmonizing the variable names, and we created variable names. So, okay, again, I need to add the path here because they are in this specify the path, the subfolder. So we created, this is an exercise that we had to do in order for us to be able to merge these data files. So I'm going to show you the harmonized variable names that we created. Now, these are spreadsheets that we created to match the old variable name to the new variable name. All right. So you can see here, for example, how many, this question here, how many adults live in your, I suppose this was home. So we call that COP demographic adults. For children, the number of children that live in that household was, children, and so on. All right. So, and these are the variable names now that we used for every wave. All right. Now to correct these variable names, there is something called a function called match. All right. In Excel, it's probably, I think it's called match index. I think there's another name for it. So you're able to identify, you're able to tell. So what this code does is that, so first of all, before I even get to that, so one of the things that I do as my practice, as practice in whenever I'm manipulating data, is that whenever I'm going to make changes to a data set that already exists in my in my uh, in my in my session, I will assign a new name or new object name so that I keep whatever, so that I keep track of the steps that I've taken. So this is what I imported, but now I want to make changes, and I'm going to make the changes in this new data frame that I'm creating, which I've simply added a one at the end. So I've created a variable. So what this code says is that assign data wave one dot to this object, and it simply creates a new data frame based on the old data frame. All right, and I'm going to make changes in this old data frame. All right, so I'm going to create that, and you'll see it. There it is. It's exactly as you can see. It's got, I mean, the characteristics of this exist are given here. So this is a data set. It's got 162 observations, and it's got 170 variables in it. All right. And even the same one, the one that I've just created has got 162 observations and 170 variables. All right. Now, this function here is now going to replace the old variable names with the new variable names. All right. And these old variable names are in the old, so it's going to replace them in the new data set, and the new names are drawn. Sorry, the new names are drawn from this data frame that I call wave one new names, which is here. I've already imported it here. Wave one new names. It's got a variable. It had, if you remember, it had two variables, uh, two columns, new names and names from wave one. All right. So I'm going to replace the old names in this data frame with the new names here. All right. So I'm going to run that. All right. What is happening? Okay, let's see what it has done. So one of the nice thing is that if there are problems, it's going to show you an error, and you may be able to identify what the challenge is. Let's have a look at this wave one dot to see if it has done anything. So it has done. It has now. If I now show the variable names that exist in this data set using the names function, is going to show me the names that now exist. Names, it's not name, so names. So you can see that the variable names have been changed into the new harmonized variables. And I can do the same for all waves. Now, I want to, as a last demonstration, I just want to demonstrate to you one of the functions that helps to, to explore unharmonized variable names. And it is this function here called compare data frame columns. This is from the package janitor. All right, so, and I'm going to, for me, I always assign them to an object so that I can see them. I don't want them, if I don't assign them to an object, it's going to give the results here in the console. But because, I find it useful to view them as a data frame. So I'm going to assign them assign this function or this action to an object. So I'm going to call it compare wave names. All right. And I use this symbol here, these symbols here, to assign whatever action that I'm doing to this specific name. All right. So I'm going to use wave 1 and wave 2 and wave 3. Now, if I do that, if I've set that up and I run that function, okay, must be either a data frame. So, okay, let me see what is happening. Maybe it wants me to specify it as a data.frame. Let's see if it's going to run. Okay. Wave input given with must either be a data frame. So it's saying that one of these is not a data frame. I'm not sure which one is not a data frame. All right. I anticipated this and I just tried to see what could be. So let me just run the rest of these functions here and see what, okay. All right. All right, this is awkward. Okay. Creating a problem. All right, this always happens, but anyway, this is part of the process with data management. Okay, so there's an issue here. All right, so but what I wanted to demonstrate to you is that this is going to create, I need to find what the challenge is. And so that I can demonstrate it to you properly. What this does is that it creates a data frame with three columns, one for wave 1.1, wave 1.2, and wave 1.3, wave 3, sorry, wave 3.1, wave 2.1, and wave 1.1. And then all the variables that exist in these data frames will be listed in a column, the first column, and any unharmonized variables will only appear in the data frame in which it exists. Thank you so much for joining today. Please join us again tomorrow when we demonstrate some of the tools for cleaning longitudinal data. So if you do have longitudinal data that you want to deal with or that you want to analyze, there's a process of cleaning the data, of visualizing the data, and that's what we're going to be dealing with tomorrow, and some of the functions that are useful in dealing with those activities. Thank you so much, and see you tomorrow.